All right, we have two more speakers right now, and they are joining us from opposite sides of the U.S. David Bornstein is a journalist for the New York Times. He's also co-founder of the Solutions Journalism Network, which promotes the rigorous reporting of responses to social problems. He's based in New York. David will be interviewing Dr. Andrew Meltzoff, who's co-director of the Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences at the University of Washington in Seattle. Dr. Meltzoff is a pioneer in the study of infant social learning. His discoveries about infant imitation have shaped our theories about human social emotional development. And he's been doing some fascinating new research about the beginnings of altruism and bias in children. Please join me in welcoming David Bornstein and Dr. Andrew Meltzoff.
Thank you, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations to Roots of Empathy on its 25th anniversary. Let's just jump in, Dr. Meltzoff. You've been researching the social nature of infants for several decades, and maybe we can just start with some of the core insights to sort of as background to set the stage from the work you've done on imitation and social learning. Maybe talk about some of those studies.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. I'll talk a little bit about those, and then maybe we can transition and talk about Mary's program as well. What we've been studying is a very important channel of learning that infants have before they have language, before they can speak a sentence on their own. They learn by observing and imitating others. And this social learning, this observational social learning, is incredibly powerful. I think we can recognize it in everyday life. Among children's favorite playthings is their telephone, or using their mother's keys, or diving into her purse to pick out her lipstick and putting it on. All these things are learned through observing the adults. Children want to be like us. And I think they register that other people out there are like me starting very early in infancy, and that is actually an important social piece of understanding. Those people out there are like me. I can act like them, and they can act like me. They learn a lot through imitation.
I know that some of the studies you've done have been very sort of surprising. I'm recalling the one where a young child, a young baby, I don't know how old, is watching an adult who has a negative emotion and changes its behavior. Can you talk about that study?
Sure. That was with 15-month-old babies. And what we did, because babies are such prolific imitators and watch so carefully what we do, we had an adult show an action to a child. They used a tool to press a button to make a buzzer come on. And when we let babies just respond naturally, they picked up this tool, pressed the buzzer, and were very happy to have the buzzer come on. But then we did this special study to investigate the power of emotions in children's life and what it means if they observe negative emotions. So what we did is have a person come into the room and sit next to the adult who is demonstrating the action of pressing the button. And when the adult pushed the button, this emoter looked over at her and said, "Oh, that's so annoying. That's really irritating." And the 15-month-old looked wide-eyed as this social interaction happened that was somewhat negative. Then we pushed the buzzer box to the child, and they would hold the tool and look up at the adult who had been responding negatively and look like they wanted to push the button, but they wouldn't do it because the person who had acted negatively to someone else was watching them. And that showed us the power of imitation and learning. Children are watching your interactions between others. And if one adult acts negatively to another adult for doing an action, the child makes an inference, perhaps this is a forbidden action. Perhaps I should not do it in front of this person who's going to get angry. And sure enough, they don't. And if the adult who is angry gets up and leaves the room, the little 15-month-old picks up the tool, looks out the door to see that the adult who was angry has left, and then does the action and makes the buzzer happen. So they're very sensitive of who's watching them and what that person's emotional history is. We think they keep track of emotional history of people and actually classify some into that's a mean person. You better be wary around that person, and that this person interacts positively with others. And that's something they learn just from watching you and your interactions. So your children are watching what you do and taking statistics all the time.
It's such a profound insight from that. I mean, we think that reinforcement are the sorts of things that really have such an impact on behavior. With those insights, I know you've taken some of those insights and you've looked at the effect on the altruism of very young children. I know that some of this research is still embargoed, but can you talk about the research that's available to be talked about?
Yeah, I can. You mentioned embargoing because we have a paper that's in press and it will be out in May. So we can happily talk late 2021. So we can happily talk about that here. So yes, I had just mentioned that babies pick up negative emotions that they see emanate from somebody. But of course, they also observe the social world, and many people in their household and in their community and in their culture act with generosity, kindness, and altruism and empathy, as Mary Gordon has shown, toward others. And our question from a scientific point of view is, were children picking up these signs of empathy or how you act altruistically to others? And we did a study that was an adaptation of a very famous study done by Felix Varnigan and Michael Tomasello that had shown infant altruism. But our twist on it, working with 19-month-olds, our twist on it was to do two studies. One where we had objects that were biological significance to babies, food. And so we had babies who we asked the mothers not to feed the babies until after they had come into the lab. So we had hungry babies coming into our lab, and the adult had a nice juicy half of a grape or a delicious slice of banana that the adult would hold up in front of the baby who was across the table. And then they would fumble the object and it would fall into a tray on the baby's side of the table. And the little 19-month-olds toddled over to this slice of juicy banana, held it in their hands and looked at it wistfully. The adult was reaching out their hands because they were indicating they wanted the banana. And we had a significant number of children hand over these bananas and grapes and strawberries, blueberries to the adult who wanted it. So this indicated to us a form of baby altruism when it costs them something. These were hungry babies who could have acted selfishly. Their mother was right behind them. They could have grabbed a slice of banana, scampered into the mother's lap. But when they saw somebody else in need, they did costly sharing. And then the new study that we just completed, we upped the stakes a bit, and we asked the mother to bring in the baby's favorite toy. And many babies brought in stuffed teddy bears and plush objects with eyes and facial features that were dear toys to the baby. And while the mother was consenting to the study, the mother slipped this object or the baby's bottle into a pouch. And the experimenter brought that into the test room. And then the test proceeded just as I described before. The adult would hold up the baby's favorite toy. The baby would look at it, reach out, and show possessiveness to the toy. The adult would accidentally drop it to the tray on the floor and then reach out, showing that the adult wanted the object that left his grasp accidentally. The babies would pick up their favorite toy, look at their mother, look at the adult, look down at the teddy, give it one last hug, and then hand it over to the adult. So we think that altruism is fairly deeply ingrained in cooperation in the human species, and responding by giving and sharing to others in apparent need is something that shows up even in 19-month-olds. And we believe for a variety of reasons, this is tuned and calibrated by the culture that they're surrounded with in their family or what they see in the environment, that tunes their expression of this altruism. But the joy was doing these studies on little baby altruism to show that they could understand your needs and desires and they could act to satisfy them. And even a little 19-month-old, when it was costly for them to do so, would share, just like we hope that we do out in society. Give the shirt off our back to somebody in need, give money to somebody in need, donate food to others in need. We can see the roots of this in the 19-month-old babies.
I mean, it's so powerful and it's very hopeful and it's very sweet and kind, but I know that the sort of the same skills and capacities can also feed into bias and can have a darker side. And can you talk about the study that you did? Because I think that there's profound implications for societies and for educators from understanding that as well.
Yes, you're right to talk. We've been talking about the light side or the adaptive side of observational social learning, watching what others do, and the positive aspects of that. But there is, as you mentioned, as you say, a dark side. And that is that from time to time, our 4, 5, and 6-year-olds are observing us and others in the culture being biased and showing bias or prejudice to others in society. And since we know that there's this powerful social learning system at work in the young child's mind, we began to wonder whether that same mechanism might be a process for the unintentional intergenerational transfer of bias by parents to their young. So parents come into our lab and are very interested in about bias, prejudice, racism. How do children get that way? They're not born biased. They're not born with prejudice. But by the studies show by 5 and 6 years of age, children are dripping with them. Parents want to know, are these biases caught or are they taught? And we think we have a mechanism by which they're caught. And that is the same social learning mechanism. So we set up a study where we had a little vignette where there was an adult in the middle and 2 people, one on either side. The adult in the middle turned to one and said, "Oh, hi, how are you?" in a very pleasant tone of voice, turned to the other and acted very cold and standoffish. "Oh, hi, how are you?" Then we asked the children to point to the screen and point to which adult they liked more. The children pointed to the adult that pointed to the person that the adult had acted positively toward. We asked them, who do they want to share with? They wouldn't share with a toy we gave them with the adult who had been the target of negative emotion, just the adult who had been the target of positive emotion. They wouldn't imitate the adult or learn a word from the adult who had been interacted negatively toward. So this was a very powerful instance that they can pick up our own bias that we demonstrate to an individual, and it affects their behavior. And then in one further study, we looked at the generalization of bias to other people who looked like that target. So we had the targets in T-shirts, like orange T-shirts or black T-shirts, dark red T-shirts. And for instance, if the adult had been, who we showed negative bias to, had been wearing a dark red T-shirt, when we said to the child at the end of the vignette, we want to play a game. I need to go out of the room and bring a person in to play the game with us. Who do you want me to bring in to play with you now? And the children responded, don't bring in that adult. Don't bring in somebody with a dark red T-shirt. In other words, they generalized their bias, not just from the person who you acted biased to, but to others who look like that person. In this case, somebody who had the same colored T-shirt. And we think that's a very powerful mechanism that relates to things that are going on in society today with our concern about the spread of bias and racism Here we have children who are 4.5 years old. I forgot to mention that in the beginning. 4.5 years old watching this vignette, picking up our bias and generalizing that bias to others to the degree that they don't even want to play with other people who look like somebody that we acted negatively towards. So this is very powerful social learning. It affects our children, and it suggests to parents we're trying to share this information to parents. Our children are social pattern detectors. They're looking out for how we interact with others. They don't know how to act with others in the world. They don't know how to use many tools or how to behave, what the norms and customs of their culture are. They look to us for guidance. And there's a sunny and bright side of that, of children learning generosity and how to turn on the light switch and learning many things from watching us. But our children are watching our negative behaviors too. And if we show a pattern of bias to people who look in a certain way, that will affect our children. Bias is caught implicitly. Children are learning all the time. They're learning from us whether we intend to teach them or not.
It's extraordinary. It's very humbling to realize that what you model is having such a profound effect. And it also really, I mean, the social pattern detection that you're talking about really explains a lot about the way that Roots of Empathy works, because there's a pattern that's being intentionally modeled. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think Mary's onto something very good when she wants to talk about the roots of empathy and pass that on to the next generation. And of course, what's so powerful in the Roots of Empathy program is that they're aware that bringing in children and parents from different races and different backgrounds from the children in the class can help spread empathy to people of races or ethnicities that the child might not encounter in their everyday life. And this is very, very powerful. It fits in with this social learning mechanism that has a neural basis that we've also studied. It fits in with that. And we think that when Roots of Empathy, for instance, just to use an example, brings in a child of a different race than the predominant race in the class, and they see the mother sing and act in a favorable way to this child of a race or ethnicity that the children in the class don't normally see. There's an anecdote Mary told me once where she said a kindergarten child in the class, when they saw the mother sing to a Black child, the child who wasn't Black themselves said, "My mother sings to me too. It's just like me." And that like me mechanism makes a connection between the child now watching another child, a baby of another race, whose mother interacts in a positive way. And I think it helps boost the empathy of the observing child for that little baby. And we know from a lot of research that being in contact with people, in positive contact with people of other races or ethnicities than our own, is one of the most powerful way of ripping down racial barriers and helping people take the perspective of others. And I think that's what's happening in its Roots of Empathy classrooms.
Oh, that's a really clear explanation. Thanks. It's been a great talking with you, and good luck with the study that comes out in May. And if people want to learn more about your research, where can they go? Is there a link that you can give them?
Thank you for asking, David. There's a link to our institute called iLabs at the University of Washington, and we have a whole set of free outreach modules that help parents, policymakers, and practitioners learn about brain development or how to talk to your child about race, develop empathy, and so forth. These are all free modules that are appropriate for parents that are on our website. I'd be delighted if people want to take a look at them. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, David and Andy. I certainly learned a lot from that talk. Thrilled to have you both join us today. And For all of you out there, if you ever doubted that kids are sponges, not now after hearing Andy's research. Parents, those kids are modeling you and you don't even realize it, so watch out. And if you're interested in checking out Andy's website, as he was saying, we have also posted it. It is on our website at rootsofempathy.org.